My name is Jonathan Newman, Sussex University, I'm a social anthropologist, and for 3 years I've been studying the Medical Cannabis Bike Tour. So this is a little talk about it and a little anthropological angle on it. Before I came on the bike tour, I hadn't, well, I'd worked in drugs and alcohol. I'd worked in rehabs and on hospital wards, and I hadn't consumed any drugs and very little alcohol for 25 years. But anthropology is participant observation, so I took to it. Okay, here's a quick introduction. I've previously been studying Colombian coffee farmers. There they all are. And then I thought we'd do a little bit of research into sport and cannabis. So I set up a research partnership, very professionally, on a plane. And the research has taken me to the halls of Westminster, and the British Parliament, and West African politicians there. It's taken me to Cloud Cuckoo Land. I've presented at major psychoactive drug conferences and in a house made for pigs. I've done some hypnagogic brainwaving, and I've had moments of very quiet contemplation. We've shared some laughs, met some new people here in Prague. I've discovered some new technology. I've been helping out, always on the move, with the president of the Slovenian Cannabis Club, and well prepared for any eventuality. This is just part of an anthropological heritage. There's the great Malinowski hanging out, and there's me hanging out. So this is the medical. This man's probably a doctor. Cannabis Bike Tour. The Medical Cannabis Bike Tour. There it is in action. It is Europe's largest cannabis sports event. It's possibly the world's largest cannabis sports event. We're not quite sure. So, here's a quote from Luke Kroll, who is one of the organizers and the owner of Paradise Seeds. And he said, 2014 will be a very exciting year. This year, prohibition all over the world starts to end. Look at the US and South America. They are all getting more tolerant towards cannabis. I think people realize that cannabis is not a drug. You can do sports with the stuff. We have proven that with the bike tour. There is a stereotype on our kind of people that use cannabis. But there's no reason for it, believe me. We are decent folks. And I think what we will see in the bike tour is people performing and enacting the decent folk. So here's an overview of the talk. We're going to look at political activism, the promotion of medical qualities of cannabis, marketing through charity sponsorship. We'll look at business networking, finding a treatment for cancer, and a passion for cycling. So, the title is it marketing or social movement? Well, this isn't a detective story, so I'll give you the answer. It's both. We'll come to that. And it's a lot more going on besides. A lot more. So, we're going to be looking within this talk at 3 issues. They're just going to keep overlapping. We're talking about cannabis economies. And we'll be looking at health. And we'll be looking at sports and leisure. But the bike ride is interesting because it keeps challenging our ideas of what our rights are, what's legitimate. And there's change taking place, which is pushing certain current meanings along these 3 themes. And there go our cyclists again. Okay. So, 2012. Whoa, that touches it. 2012, 2 riders started. Luke Kroll from Paradise Seeds and Mate from Snail Rolling Papers. They're going on a cycling holiday in Spain, tasting the wines, enjoying themselves, both clean cyclists. But they're also in touch with the International Association for Cannabinoid Medicines. So they think, okay, we can turn our holiday into something. We'll raise money for the cancer research using cannabinoids by the team of Dr. Manuel Guzman, who many of you may have heard about. It's a small ride, not much publicity. And there he is. There's Velasco, Dr. Velasco. He's part of that team. Okay, 2013. This is when we come on board. And there's 16 riders. Snail are there, Paradise are there, Soft Secrets are there, Dizzy Duck are there, the Bush Doctor. These are the sort of businesses involved. Everyone knows each other. And actually, we're the only outsiders. So my first impressions is I had no idea what was going on. I just knew these weren't the sort of people I normally was with. And that's become a very little interesting journey for me. So, the ride. It's in the mountains. Can I take this out? Yeah, the ride's in the mountains. We're going up hills, down hills. We're getting lost. People are smoking on the ride. And I'm thinking, this isn't my idea of sport either. This is challenging what I think should be going on. We keep getting lost. The satellite navigation doesn't work. The phones don't work in the mountains. And it's a hard sports event. And we finish at GrowMed. And here's the sponsors from 2013. You can see them all up there. And GrowMed, of course, was a bit like this. My first encounter with the cannabis industry. We didn't even realize people were in the cannabis industry, or there was a cannabis industry, until we arrive at this, or something similar. So, that's 2013. 2014, maybe there were 35 riders. We're not quite sure. It just expanded that a little bit beyond friends. And there's other people on there. Herbies came in to do some filming. Canna pedaled in. Positronics came in. UK Sonic Hydro, Organic Bart. Jorge Cervantes comes along on a nice bike. And a really nice guy. I spent some time with him. And Cannafest sponsor the 2014 ride. We get Tim, becomes the press officer. And it's hard. 2014 is so hard. I mean, there's a French semi-pro rider on the ride. And he's kind of helping people through. He said to me, you don't fight the mountain, you fight yourself. And they're following the Tour de España in places. It's just hard road cycling up mountains. And we finish in Spannabis. They sort of negotiate a little space for us. And at Spannabis, we start to see a change in the industry. We start to see that American money starts to sort of come in, a bit of venture capital, a few stock market companies. But 2014 is also another turning point for my research. I start to realize that cancer is affecting the lives of most of the riders. It hadn't occurred to me. And in fact, I will say there's one thing that unites this ride, and it isn't cannabis. It's actually cancer and people being affected by cancers. And it's trying to deal with that. So, in a way, that's the real motivation. And it's linked to specific funding. And here's the sponsors for 2014. We can see more sponsors coming on board. And at the stand, they're sort of filming and they're promoting themselves. But they're also promoting serious scientific research, which I'll talk about soon. So 2015, 55 riders. It's got a lot bigger. It's got a lot bigger. Once again, Cannafest are in there. And what they're doing is they're funding leading medical research to use cannabinoids as a first treatment against gliomas, brain tumors. This is independent, well, as independent as you can get from major pharmaceuticals needing a patented product. So this is a case of the industry saying, can you use our product? Not a pharmaceutical industry saying, we want a product. It's very different. There's a need to legitimize, but it's producing a novel, a new way of funding medical research, which is probably going to have further implications way beyond the cannabis industry. 2015, it was mostly on the flat. It was a Dutch touring holiday. It was speed more than endurance. And for me, I start to realize the tour is also a lot about cycling, not about other issues. There's other stuff happening. And they finish at Freedom Day in Amsterdam, which is protesting against the restrictions in Holland to the cannabis trade. So, I think we've seen some of that. And some more bicycling. And of course, here we see Luca Mattei handing over a check to that medical research team. And these are pioneering trials. This is a pilot study, but it really will change. If they get a positive result from that study, they will show that cannabis can be effective with other drugs in the treatment of cancers against gliomas, reducing their coming back and possibly destroying them. That's a huge step for a crazy industry. And it is a crazy industry. But in fact, what they're contributing could be enormous. And I don't think that should be forgotten. So, I normally have to explain what this is when I do this talk, but here it's quite easy. Here is the cannabis industry. There's Miss Advanced Nutrient signing her calendars. But here we come. Back to Guillermo and what he's trying to do. So there's a glioma. You can sort of see it. This is actually what killed a friend of mine. They're aggressive, nasty little cancers. And they're trying to deal with this. I mean, there's all this stuff, cannabis cancer, but there's so many different types of cancer. There's quite a few types of cannabis, but there's so many different types. And Guillermo's saying, look, we're looking at one area of cancer research, but it's an important area, and it could lead to other things. And of course, this team, this isn't the cannabis industry just funding some half-baked research. These are one of the most important researchers in cancer and gliomas there is. This is important research. It's very well respected. Those are their journals. And there we see it, 2013, 2014, and 2015, the big check. And a big thank to the sponsors, because it's the sponsors who provided it. And there you see, it's constant marketing. So, here's the question, which I already answered at the beginning. Is it funding medical research, promoting the cannabis industry? So, is it really just about the cannabis industry finding a bit more marketing and using the medical research? Or is the promotion of the cannabis industry actually funding medical research? Well, it's both. And the position you take is a political position. So I talk to some people and they say, oh, this is just cynical marketing. And I say, why? And they say, well, look, they're just promoting themselves. But then you look at what it's actually contributing to, and that promotion is contributing to serious medical research. And then those people go off and drink fair trade coffee and don't realize they're involved in a further marketing exercise. I will come to that. Here I am with it. So there is Ford. They're doing their corporate responsibility and they're treating breast cancer. And there's Kentucky Fried Chicken. Man, they're contributing to breast cancer research too. And there's Selena Scott, a UK TV personality from about the 1980s, promoting Nescafe, but different Nescafe, fair trade Nescafe. And maybe we might be cynical and say, oh, Kentucky Fried Chicken, they're not, that's a bit corporate, you know. But, fair trade, this is good. The coffee industry is good. You see, where we decide whether something's marketing or something's actually doing some good is a political position. And it says a lot about ourselves. It doesn't say what's right or wrong. It just says something about who we are. So, back to the bike ride. I think it's very important not to forget, it is a bike ride. And people hang out, they have some beers, they have some smokes, they get tired, they have a very nice lunch break. And it's an enjoyable event. And I love that photo. That's why it's in there. They win medals, they hang out. And I've had a great time. I met some lovely, lovely people. I can't say, you know. It has transformed me a bit. I didn't realize quite how conservative I was until I started studying this. But some people, very wise people, very inspirational people. So I've had a good time too. I'm not going to pretend I haven't. And there's a spirit of sport. I need to mention that. I mean, this guy, this English guy, he came in 4 hours after everyone else. 4 hours, and everyone waited for him. He came in, hero's welcome. He was like, you can see it. And he felt a hero too. I mean, it's quite beautiful. And there we see a normal bike ride taking place. That's what's happening. This isn't a marketing exercise at this point, is it? It isn't even raising money. It's just a bike ride. Then we see the maps and the stretching. It's a normal event. And it's got some characters. It's got some great characters. 2015 also brought, I think very importantly, the first non-cannabis connection. So this woman with a thumbs up, she'd found it through a link on Facebook. So she did bike tours. She went away every weekend to a different bike tour. And so I was intrigued by her. I mean, it was like, what's she doing here? She has no connection whatsoever to anyone in the industry, anyone smoking cannabis, anything. She just turns up. And she says, I says, is this like a normal bike tour? And she says, it's exactly the same. There is no difference. It's fun. We're raising money for charity. We get lost. There's a lot of companionship. There's a lot of competitiveness. You push yourself. You learn new skills. And I said, really? It's no different whatsoever? Not any? She said, it's exactly the same. I said, what about the smoking? And she said, oh, yeah, no, that's different. Everyone keeps stopping for 20 minutes, rolling up a spliff, having a smoke, and getting back on the bike, and then we're back on. Oh, yeah, that bit's different. So there is a slight difference, but we're still on a normal bike ride. And there we see some people just sort of chilling out. And I should point out, before I do that, some people take isotonic drinks. Other people don't. Some people on the ride smoke cannabis on the ride, after the ride, or not at all. As I say, it's not really the cannabis uniting people. It's the cause. So, I'm going to show you a little film while I talk about the next bit. But what I'm going to talk about is this idea of the cannabis bike ride actually being a social movement. And I'll explain what that means. But we're looking at ways, without intent, it's changing the way we think about many aspects of society and what we do. But I'm going to escape from this and play you a little film as I speak. Just to remind yourself that it is just normal. So, if it's a social movement, they're going to be challenging what we understand as normal. There's certain power relations going on in society. And by chance, just because of who these people are, they will be saying, things don't quite make sense. Your vision of what is acceptable and your vision of what is normal is not quite right. And we can see this in classic movements. For example, women used to say, well, I want a job as a doctor. And a long time ago, people would say, can a woman be a doctor? Can someone of a different skin color be a model? Well, I'm not sure. Can they be on television? They would have these discussions. We find that a bit strange now. But those discussions were had. So, if they are a social movement, they should be shifting some ideas. And one of the ideas they shift, in fact, they challenge very strongly, are ideas around sport. What sport is meant to be. Because sport is meant to be pure right now. Sport is meant to be the Olympics. It is meant to be these super refined human beings leading very healthy lives. Sport is a public health initiative. And yet here we have a confusion because we have people indulging in a public health initiative which is meant to make us healthy whilst doing something that is a public health problem, which is cannabis. Cannabis is a public health problem according to the World Health Organization. So what's going on? How are they able to do the two things? They don't think, oh, I'm going to challenge this, I'm going to prove it wrong. They just do it. It's part of lifestyle. It's part of identity. And then we have other issues when we look at that. We look at how sport is examined and how cannabis in sport is examined. And when we look at articles on cannabis in sport, they are quite shocking because they go to extraordinary lengths to show that cannabis should not be used in sport. And there's a very interesting category by the doping authorities. It's called the spirit of sport. And the spirit of sport is meant to reflect all our good society values. Everything that's good about society is meant to be in the spirit of sport. Listen to this. Health, excellence in performance, character and education, fun and joy, teamwork, dedication and commitment, respect for rules and laws, respect for self and other participants, courage, community, solidarity. That's what sport is meant to be about. And they say the use of cannabis in sport does not comply to that. And they bring one piece of evidence. They say an athlete was caught using cannabis and lost their sponsorship. This proves conclusively that it is against the spirit of sport. Now, we know that's a nonsense. It is very weak evidence. In fact, I think this study is one of the only studies of open cannabis use in sport. I think it is the only study. And so it's the only one that can look at that spirit of sport. And obviously, we have evidence here that's not true. But why did they have to write that? Why did they have to write such a weak argument? They had to write it because right now it is unthinkable for people to use cannabis in sport. It's unthinkable. It's hard to breach that gap. But what we see here are people doing it without any problem at all. It's not a conscious, we're going to go out there. It's just what they do. And I mean, I'll tell you who I've met. I've met people who use cannabis in the gym, playing football, swimming, ice skating, mountain biking, running, bowling, playing golf. I've met triathletes, cricketers, hikers, basketball players, and tennis players, all who use cannabis in their sport. In fact, it's hugely popular. The World Doping Authority, the third most detected substance they have in all their urine tests is cannabis. People are doing it. So why have we got this idea of healthy sport and unhealthy drugs when the practices are going on together? So we get a challenge there. We get a challenge to what's going on. And we get another challenge. And that's to ideas of what we do with cannabis. I think this is the most interesting and one that kind of affects this in a way. Cannabis collectively is used at places like this, at music festivals, maybe in a cannabis social club. This is how we use it. We get as stoned as we can, and we go, this is it. This is how you use cannabis. And now we're sort of inventing medical cannabis and ways of using medical cannabis. We're sort of having to come up with this stuff because it hasn't been there before. But what we see here is a way of saying, well, there's many ways you can collectively use cannabis. It doesn't have to be the way you see it. You can do this. You can do any sport. You might want to do other things too. The drug fits in with lifestyle. It even fits in with healthy lifestyle. So, let's get away from him and come back to here. So here we see, let's go to F5. Hey, no. Okay, we're going to have to go through this. So, this is very annoying. Hang on. And it's going to go too far, huh? Maybe I said, no, it's not. Come on. Dun, dun, dun. If I hit it harder, it'll go quicker, huh? Okay, so, coming up. Here we see a cannabis social club. That's the image of cannabis, and that's the one kind of projected out there. That's what you guys kind of do a lot of. That is a very, very, very different image of cannabis. I mean, let's just go back. highly different. It's kind of saying health. And if you're saying medical cannabis, you should also be saying health. And I don't know about you, maybe I've got a lot to learn, but that just doesn't look like health to me. That just looks like what it is, and that does. So at some point, you might consider changing what the marketing is. So there's another issue comes up, and that's what the bicycle ride really, at the heart of it, it challenges, which is moral and legal illegitimacy. And what we see with that, let's put it like this. There's a very nice quote. It says, morality, ambivalence, and uncertainty hang over the cannabis user. The West African politician I was talking to at that parliamentary conference, he says, the people who smoke this are dirty. And we call the stuff weed. And on the 2015 bike tour, we stopped for lunch in a pub car park. And we moved on almost immediately because of the cannabis users. We are not welcome. We are a bit dirty. We're like out of place. So we see a lot of legal reform and we see lots of people maneuvering and campaigning. But there's very interesting work about how far this can go, academic work. And it says you can't get legal reform just on independent profiteering. That American model. We'll just make money, they'll reform. It says no. At some point, you will get chopped if you do that. You actually have to benefit the central moral values of the collective. And it says individual profit is only allowed within certain limits. Or as Irun said very clearly on the second day of the bike tour, if you don't give something back to society, they come and get you. So medical cannabis is actually an example of this because it provides a treatment for illness and therefore the benefits are central to the values of society. Medical cannabis, that term is giving something back. The Medical Cannabis Bike Tour gives money for important medical research while doing healthy sport. It produces productive bodies and medical research. It gives something back. And it's an alternative public image and private purpose for the participants of the cannabis trade. Because if you look at the participants of the cannabis trade, they've been told all their lives they're doing something wrong. This is a dirty business, so we are told. In the United States now, it's not quite so dirty. Something shifted, something changed. So you've got a group of people out there trading with other people telling them, you shouldn't be doing this. But why not? Because if you actually look what they've started to do, the contribution, we might look back at it in the future and say that is a most significant contribution. So I think images like this make it harder for observers of the cannabis industry to see profiteering entrepreneurs in a dirty business. But that view still persists. I went to see the European drug monitoring people in Lisbon. They're employed by the European government to monitor drug use. And it's fascinating how they do it. They look at police seizures of drugs. They look at hospital admissions. And they spend millions checking the sewage. The wastewater is monitored in all European community for drugs from which they work out what people are using. And I said to them, why don't you just ask the producers what they are producing? They said, we can't do that. I said, well, you can with the cannabis industry. You could find out how many seeds are sold. They said, no, we can't do that. We can't talk to these people. I said, why can't you talk to them? He said, no, absolutely not. And that's quite interesting, because it would save them millions. It would save them millions, but they're not prepared to do it yet. Why not? Why not? And it's to do with how we categorize and classify. And I think the bike tour is very interesting, because it is trying, in its little way, to push those classifications and just say, this is who we are, and this is acceptable. So I think there's a huge contribution to changing the moral idea of cannabis use in the cannabis trade. but there's still a long way to go. And I think more communication needs to be done with those government people. Okay, so we have shifts in medical research. Here we go. Here's Global Pharma. Here's GW. I guess they're not so popular here, but this is what they're doing. And that is sanctioned wealth. Their wealth through the cannabis trade is sanctioned. Everyone, not everyone, but sort of dominant model is this is okay. But this cannabis medicine is in those dirty economic margins. It's only dirty because we put it there. I mean, not we as a collective society do that. Doesn't mean anything. And as I keep saying, the states keep showing this is just how we're doing it right now. But look what happens in those dirty margins. I mean, this is where I think it gets fascinating. Oops. All right, come to. No. Okay, I'll keep off this thing. Okay. Because what we have, the funding of this is not connected to the pharmaceutical industry. So it gives us possibility. It gives us possibility of producing drugs which are not linked to patents, which are not linked to global pharma. The possibility. It'll be a very uphill battle. And they're trying to get legitimacy. And they're trying to determine how effective cannabis is as a medicine. Not to get a product, just how effective it is. And the more legitimate cannabis is, the more money these guys would make. That's fair enough. And I think they want it to be legitimate because it's very hard trading near the lines of legality. I mean, what I keep seeing is what is legal one day is illegal the next day. What is legal one day is illegal. How do you trade like that? It's a very high-risk business trading anyway. It makes it even harder. And the normal risks and opportunities of trade are exaggerated by the severe consequences of criminalization, which the European government cannot standardize. But there's a great writer, and she says, the economy is a political terrain. And she says, within these legal, illegal sectors, you have enormous productive activity, which might, in some places, totally change what's going on. And it says, you're in the margins, but you're absolutely in the norm. And this, I think, is one of the greatest contributions, which has sort of been overlooked. Because the boom in cannabis medicines, everything you see about cannabis and medicine, has come out of this industry. This industry, all those sponsors, all this crazy stuff here, is actually what made it possible. All those people producing different genetics, different growing techniques, different horticultural techniques, have produced cannabis, which actually, and produced different cannabis extracts. We're starting to see medical use come from it. These are the people who did it. Because we're saying they're dirty, we won't admit that. We won't go, oh, they made a great contribution. This could be a game changer. We won't say that. We'll say, oh, they're dirty businessmen. They're not. They made it all possible. And I think someday we might actually go back and thank them. But I think that will take some time yet. So, there's one other point. As all the research of cannabis medicines develops, I don't think the trade here wants to be excluded. They helped build it. They helped made it possible. But what we will see is global pharma coming in. The bigger companies will come in. And, yeah, you will see. The other aspect of the bike ride is these guys don't have much power. That's why they're on bikes. They're not going to the European community in suits at big meetings. They're not invited to UN gas. They're not invited anywhere. The blooming monitoring people in Europe won't even speak to them. A phone call and they could save themselves millions. They won't do it. Why? So, anyway. So, final bit before the questions. So we got the big drug policy reform in the United States, which might all change in 2016 and go the other way, but that's always worth thinking about. We've got this idea of corporate social responsibility, but catch on. They're not Kentucky Fried Chicken, the bike ride, and they're not Ford motor cars. They got a lot less power. They got a lot less power. That's why they're on the bicycles. It's not quite corporate social responsibility. It's actually far more genuine than that. It's far less marketing and far more, can we actually do something? And that changes the view of the industry. Because if these are just human beings trying to sort of have a bike ride for cancer, which is, you know, what I see in my own town, other people doing it, then they're not quite so dirty. It's our understanding of what the material object they trade in. We say, cannabis is dirty, people work with it, they're dirty. The economy is dirty anyway. Right. So, final bit. The bike ride is a sporting exercise of economic rights by traders facing restrictive frustrations and legal dangers while trying to reach a potentially vast new customer base. But like other charitable behavior, it's also a response to being ignored by powerful medical and political institutions and an attempt to give something back to society. They want to be admitted, and they're not. They're stuck on bicycles. And that's it. So if there are any questions, you're welcome. You gave me a hard question of breaking convention, so I hope it's not so hard.
Thanks for your talk. Very thought-provoking. A couple of things. Cannabis has always been seen as medical. We didn't invent it to suddenly become accepted. The reason why the medical things have changed in the States is because of medical marijuana, not recreational marijuana. I don't think you made that distinction clear enough that there are two parties going on. The one is the recreational side, and the other one is the medical side. And actually, a lot of people in this business are doing it medicinally because anyone who knows the history of cannabis, who knows the background of cannabis, and who knows the plant, knows that it's a medicinal plant and has 25,000 other uses, including fiber and seed. So the dirtiness of it is a misnomer that it was placed in the 1950s in order to suppress it. And that poster that you showed, it was an old poster. It's not where we are now. There's a big shift going. I've been in the cannabis business only 11 years, but in those 11 years, I've seen an incredible shift in consciousness around cannabis and the uses of cannabis and medicinal cannabis and the demand for medicinal cannabis. It's a huge medicinal demand. If a bike ride is going to fund £100,000 worth of research, because I can't get a medical marijuana license in England, but GW Pharmaceutical can. Why are they the only company in England that are granted a medicinal license and no one else can be? That's the dark side of this whole business, is that medicinal marijuana is known to be a very powerful medicine, and that's why now they're trying to control it with very, very limited, monopolized pharmaceutical licenses to certain people who are already in the game, and small people like us will never even get a look in. So a bike ride, it maybe is a good way of actually funding our own research. Maybe that's what we need to do. Let them play that game, but maybe we need to be a bit clever and smarter. A bit of civil disobedience and a bit of rebellious action, actually, I really think at this point. Because right now, it's very obvious, they don't want us to be in medicinal marijuana. They want to keep it like this so that in the end, Big Pharma can get all the patents and completely start controlling this plant. And it's one of the only plants on the planet that hasn't got a patent and hasn't got like Monsanto on it or any of the big farmers on it. And it's been hidden underground, I think, because of that. It's a people's plant and needs to be grown by the people for the people. And that's why it has reached this level of, well, this, like you said, this dichotomy.
Okay. And I know you have a huge interest in sort of plant economies, really, because that's what we're talking about, aren't we? We're just talking about an object. This is a commodity war going on, really. I mean, sometimes I sit back and I just think, what the hell's going on? People are putting such effort into just having another commodity. I mean, at one level, that's what's going on. At one level. At another level, certain economic forces are trying to dominate the control of a certain commodity. Other people are saying, no, we want it to work this way. We want the commodity to work this way. We want the economy to work this way. It's all being contested. And what's happened recently, this is why I said the invention of medical use, is because, in a sense, as we're shifting what that object is and how transgressive it is, we're having to invent. And that invention isn't people necessarily sitting down on a piece of paper. It's them experiencing things and talking with other people and talking on the internet and finding what's happening with their bodies and finding what's happening with what they eat and their lifestyles, and then understanding that commodity within that sense. So this is a huge part of identity politics, because what we even consider to be medicine, I mean, there's a lot of medical anthropology, and it says, you know, most people self-medicate. Most people self-medicate pharmaceutical medicines. I mean, that's the majority of medical taking. What we consider to be a medicine, what we consider to be an illness, doesn't necessarily have to be sanctioned by some sort of central medical council. I
think I wouldn't call it a war on commodity. I'd call it a war on consciousness, actually, because if you meet an 18-year-old that's smoking marijuana and you meet an 18-year-old that's drinking a lot of alcohol, the one with the consciousness shift is usually the one who's smoking the marijuana. I mean, we have a situation with very high-level skunk, but actually people who are smoking reasonably leveled marijuana are doing it because they're needing to shift out of the consciousness of what's happening and understanding a bit more of what life's all about. It's called plant consciousness. And it's not a commodity. Medicine isn't a commodity. Medicine is a human right and comes from plants. Well, and we're missing the point here. And that's the reason why GW Pharmaceutical have the monopolized license to grow hemp or cannabis and we don't, is because actually it's all plant-derived. And by banning a plant, they can have control over our medicine. And actually anyone could grow hemp. That's why it's called weed, because anyone can grow it in their back garden and self-medicate themselves. And that's why 2 million people in the United Kingdom are smoking and self-medicating on it. I mean, this isn't sidelined, it's underground. But lots,
so, I mean, okay. So there we start to see the transition from it going underground to overground, and now we're talking publicly. I mean, I had an interesting conversation with Jorge Cervantes about when he took off the disguise. There was a point he had a disguise, and then he realized he could do without it. So things are changing, but they can change back very quickly.